I did not know exactly where the focus would be for this sermon initially. Mohsen Mirza suggested the topic of music and spirituality maybe a couple of months back now. And I thought, well, that's a great idea, but it's such a huge topic. I'm not sure that one sermon is going to cover all that needs to be said about music and spirituality. But I put a Facebook question up early in the week, and a lot of you provided some great responses to the idea of the question of what music brings you inspiration or inspires joy in you. And there were so many varied responses to that. And I went through them and I realized something as I was going through all of those responses. You really have to pay attention to get the most out of the music. If it's just going on in the background, you might miss some of the value that it has to offer. And it takes time. Music exists in time. We can't just glance at it or put it on fast forward and get as much out of it. We have to be patient to receive all that the music has to offer us. And the pandemic has made me a little impatient. Well, American culture, in my lifetime at least, has been all about instant gratification. And that has been really tough to have during this pandemic year. I can be impatient with things that I really enjoy, like solving puzzles can be really rewarding to me. I love doing it. Word puzzles or escape room kinds of puzzles, but it requires some patience sometimes. When I'm not feeling patient, when I'm feeling frustrated, I want to find the solutions quickly. And when I get that impatience going, I miss part of the enjoyment of losing myself in the process of solving the puzzle. I miss the real satisfaction of spending the time that it takes to find the solution. Sometimes we can be a little impatient with music too. And yet we have to give music time if we want it to be spiritual, if we want to get the most out of it. Human beings of every culture make music. Isn't that amazing? We can express ourselves in language, really complicated language sometimes, and yet music reaches an entirely different level within us. Hans Christian Andersen wrote, "When words fail, music speaks." There's a specific area of our brains that processes language, but music engages our whole brains, left hemisphere and right hemisphere, neurons firing all over the place. We can see the effects of music, and yet it is still mysterious in so many ways. Music reaches us at a very deep level, and that can be profoundly spiritual, but we have to give it time. It was tough deciding on a piece of music to share with you in this service because so much of the music that can be deeply moving also takes a bit of time to fully experience. We have to be patient with it. Usually we can't just hear a moment of music out of context and feel its full emotional depth. We have to take the journey. So instead of playing favorites and picking one out of the many, many responses on the Facebook page, I'd like us to spend a moment and experience the Nimrod variation from Elgar's Enigma Variations as performed by the Juilliard Orchestra. It's about 4 minutes. And I just invite you to set aside whatever else you're doing at the moment and listen, experience, take the journey of this music. About 4 minutes, and that piece of music takes me on an emotional journey. For me, it's a powerful one. Maybe you have a different experience of that music. Whatever we get from listening to that piece or any piece of music, though, we have to sink into it and allow it some space. We have to surrender a bit of control. Khalil Gibran said, "Music is the language of the spirit. It opens the secret of life, bringing peace, abolishing strife." But sometimes we get impatient when we engage in music making as a spiritual practice too. We can't speak that language of the spirit impatiently. You might not have performed with other musicians in an orchestra like those Juilliard students, but have you ever been part of a drum circle? There's this moment that happens, not every time I've been in a drum circle, but a lot of times there's a moment where you feel completely in sync with all the other drummers. It doesn't happen at the very beginning. It takes time for everyone to relax and lock into the communal rhythm. And when that happens, it's like a meditation. It's like the experience is extracted from normal time and exists in a separate realm. Sometimes we call that feeling flow, but it takes willingness on our part. We can't demand that we feel in sync with all those people. We can't demand that sense of transcendence. We have to be patient. Some cultures understand this when it comes to expressing spirituality in music, like when a simple refrain is chanted over and over again. The first time I heard a chant like that, I wasn't really impressed. It didn't hold my attention. I believe it was Sheila Chandra chanting, Om Namah Shiva, Om Namah Shiva, Om Namah Shiva, Om Namah Shiva. That was it, over and over. The translation is all praise to Shiva, or some translations might be universal consciousness is one. And so I thought, maybe I just don't get it because I don't practice Hinduism. It's just not doing anything for me. It seemed too simplistic. But the problem wasn't the music's simplicity. The simplicity of the music is the point. The problem was my demand that it be something more, that it serve a different purpose than it was intended to serve. That simple refrain over and over allows the chanter to enter into that state of flow. Some might say a state of transcendence, a mental and spiritual space that is set apart. It becomes sacred when we're patient with it. A lot of our traditional hymns have a robust theology in them. The lyrics are more complicated and the melodies are sometimes a bit complex too, because they're expressing a complicated spiritual message. And music helps with remembering those kinds of messages. Remember, music engages our whole brain. So when we sing something, we have a better chance of really taking it in, as opposed to when we read it or hear it spoken or even speak it out loud ourselves. When I was learning my multiplication tables back in the 3rd grade, I had a really hard time with it until my mom found these songs. When I could put the math to a melody, it stuck with me. Same thing with spiritual ideas. So more complex music has a place in our spiritual practice as well. We used to sing a lot of things in the Lutheran Church where I served as director of worship in the arts, but those more complicated lyrics and melodies serve a different purpose than some of the simpler repeated songs and chants. It's kind of funny that the simpler music requires more patience from us. I used to hear the complaint in other churches all the time, why can't we just sing a song once and be done with it? Some people were counting the minutes until the church service was done. They didn't want to repeat a song over and over again. I hesitate to call that expectation of just getting through things a worship service, but they just wanted to get to the end. They were impatient. So they didn't see the value in repeating a simple spiritual song over and over and over. The irony is, if they let go of their distractions and impatience and just accepted the invitation to be fully immersed in that song, they might have truly entered into an elusive spiritual experience. But I can't really judge them because I've been impatient too. I know what that's like. That song we sang as our prelude today, Nada de Turbe, is part of a tradition of spiritual music called Taizé. It has a simple, repeated musical refrain, and then more complex lyrics, usually a psalm, is sung over top of it, and sometimes some instrumental counter melodies and things too. But most of the participants are singing a simple refrain over and over again. So Taizé attempts to have the best of both worlds, that repeated chorus that can get us into a state of flow, along with more complex melody that maintains interest for our impatient brains. That's a little more challenging to do over Zoom. But whether we are listening to music or participating in it, our willingness to set aside our other worries and demands and expectations, our willingness to be patient, is what opens the way for spiritual depth, maybe transcendence. It isn't the music that does it, not completely. It's our willingness. And that lesson translates to other experiences. Meditation, for instance. We have to be patient and allow ourselves the time to settle into the spiritual practice. We have to be patient with ourselves over time as we develop a skill of meditation, if we want to experience the spiritual depth that is available to us, at least. What else in your life has required patience from you in order to find fulfillment or even transcendence? Maybe you've spent time in nature and realized that it takes patience to allow your mind to set aside other concerns and just be immersed in that environment. Maybe you've had a hard time being immersed in a peaceful environment because it's really tough to turn off our mental chatter. What's present in your life right now that's requiring your patience? I mean, aside from all of our anxiety about getting vaccines and getting together in person again, that certainly requires some patience. What are you feeling impatient about? And is there an opportunity for you to relax into the natural pace of things and experience greater peace or fulfillment or joy or even a depth of emotion that makes us feel a bit vulnerable? The first notes of that Elgar variation don't immediately make me feel a depth of emotion. If I just let the music play in the background, I might not even feel much of anything. But when I listen to it on its own terms, at its own pace, it usually stirs up something within me, which is to say, I almost always cry with that piece of music. But I have to be patient, vulnerable even, willing to surrender a bit of control. It might be that way with a lot of other things too. The spiritual experience we have with music, that feeling that a piece of music is transcendent, teaches us the value of patience with ourselves and with all of our spiritual practices, and maybe with other human beings too. Maybe that's why Khalil Gibran wrote that music is the language of the spirit. Music teaches us spiritual truths, at least one of which is that patience offers us great reward. So for our meditation today, I invite you to chant with me for a few moments and allow this space to be a patient space of surrender. We can sing something that reminds ourselves of our own strength to live into our values with integrity. Something like, I have the courage to be at peace with myself and with others. I have the courage to be at peace with myself and with others. I have the courage to be at peace with myself and with others. I have the courage to be at peace with myself and with others. I have the courage to be at peace with myself and with others. I have the courage to be at peace with myself and with others. I have the courage to be at peace with myself and with others. I have the courage to be at peace with myself and with others. I have the courage to be at peace with myself and with others. I have the courage to be at peace with myself and with others. I have the courage to be at peace with myself and with others. I have the courage to be at peace with myself and with others. I have the courage to be at peace with myself and with others. I have the courage to be at peace with myself and with others. I have the courage to be at peace with myself and with others. I have the courage to be at peace with myself and with others. We have to get past that part of our brains that says, how many times are we going to sing this? What am I going to do after this music? What comes next in my life? What have we just been talking about? Is he going to keep doing this over and over and over again? We have to quiet our brains and be willing to focus on one thing, to be able to lose ourselves, immerse ourselves in that music in order for it to be a spiritual practice. My hope is that you find time for yourself with a simple song or a favorite song or a new piece of music you've never heard before, that you find time to be patient with it, to allow it space and give it permission to influence your life, your heart, your emotions, your spirit this week. Amen.